Okay, this tutorial is going to cover a variety of topics, which is why I've called it odds and ends. Um, we're going to cover a variety of small topics that don't really need their own tutorial. First up is Ancova. Stands for analysis of covariance. ANOVA with a covariate. Well, what's a covariate? Ideally, it's a variable that correlates with the DV, but it's unrelated to the factors. The main idea here is that we're using the relationship between the covariate and the dependent variable to suck off unexplained variance, just like we did with the pre-post correlation. Just like the pre-post correlation reduces the standard error, covariates can do the same to the extent that they're related to the DV, but not the factor. This brings in a new assumption, which is called homogeneity of covariance, sometimes referred to as homogeneity of regression. All this means is that the relationship between the covariate and the dependent variable is going to be the same across all of the different cells of the design. And what's neat about this assumption is that this assumption is actually very easily tested. If the covariate DV relationship is not the same across all of the cell designs of the cell, you will see an interaction effect. You will see a significant interaction between your factor and your covariate. So how we're going to start to evaluate this assumption is we're just going to run an analysis with both the covariate, the factor, and then the interaction between the factor and the covariate. If there is no interaction, we pull that interaction out and note that we've met the assumption. If there is an interaction, it means we haven't met the assumption. You can certainly still analyze data that way, but you would need to be using a slightly different approach, probably regression with interactions. You can see here I've in this example looked at the effects of grades, and these were based on a study where we used two different types of learning situations. And we also recognized, however, that grade point average is always going to correlate with a person's in-class performance. So we wanted to see if there was an interaction between GPA and course. We can see the GPA course interaction is not significant. That means we have met the assumption. And we simply rerun it without the interaction, and you see we have an effect for course. Notice we definitely want to go back and rerun it without the interaction, because that interaction is taking a lot of the explanatory value away here. So really very, very simple. I think I often say, once you learn a few of these techniques, others roll in pretty easily. I think this is a nice example of that, relatively straightforward modification to what we've done. One thing people talk about a good deal in terms of Ancova is adjusted means. Adjusted means are means that have been adjusted for the presence of the covariate. And practically what that means is that the grades are now as if everybody had the same grade point average. So if everyone had the same grade point average, what would the mean values be? And we can see a very large difference between regular and online learning. Some warnings about covariates. If you took my Psych 642 class, probably heard about this. Increasingly, there is advice to avoid covariates. Just don't use them. Or I would say don't use them without very strong justification. This article by Simmons, Nelson, and Simonson, which is coming up on its 10th anniversary, called False Positive Psychology, very influential piece, has tens of thousands of citations, I believe. What they demonstrated using simulations was that if you throw in covariates, this is going to dramatically increase the rate of false positives. So that's really problematic. And there are some folks who were trained to use as many covariates as you possibly can. And that's increasingly not becoming what the recommendation is because of these issues. Unless I have pre-registered an analysis, I'm not going to employ any design that uses covariates. If I do have covariates, it would be something that's entirely exploratory. Whoops.